Hi, welcome back to 9.2. We've been graphing lines. In the first section, we talked about how to graph independent lines, and those are the ones where you just thought of both x and y at the same time because they were on the same side of the equation. In the second part to it, we are now going to be talking about graphing dependent lines, and that's where one letter depends on what the other letter is. So these look totally different. In these, you have one letter, usually Y, that's over here all by itself. And then you have the other letter on the right side, and they've done something to that letter. Okay? So you can't think of them at the same time. You're going to have to choose the one that they do something to, do the math, and figure out what the other letter is. So that's your table method. Your table, you're going to choose some number for the letter that's on the right side, do the math so that you can figure out what the letter on the left side is. You can't just look at these and figure them out. You have to actually do math now. Okay, so I've got several examples here, and we're going to talk about how to do a table for each one of them. In the first example, I have y is equal to x minus 3. Now, you'll notice that the y is all by itself, so it is the dependent letter. Okay, it depends on what you choose to replace x with. So x is considered to be the independent letter. So x is the one that I'm going to come up with. So on my table, I'm coming up with something for x. You can choose anything you want, okay? I don't care what you choose for x. Let's say that for x, I decided to choose 3, okay? I just picked 3 out of the air, y'all. There's nothing to it. Now, when I put 3 into this equation, I'll have y equals 3 minus 3. So that gives me mathematically that y is going to be equal to 0. So 0 is what I got for y because it depended on what I chose for x. Well, that's only one point. I got to pick another one. Let's say I pick 4. Okay? If I choose 4 for x, I'm going to go to the same equation. Y is equal to x, which we said was 4, minus 3. That tells me that y is 1. So now I know that my y is 1. So now I have 2 pairs that would work in that equation, and I'm ready to graph them. Okay? On the second example I gave you, y is equal to negative 3x. Okay? Y is over here all by itself. So that means that y is going to be the dependent one when I get ready to do my table. I'm going to have to do some math to figure out what y is. Okay? X is over here on the right side. But this time I have to figure out, well, what does it tell me to do to x? According to this problem, I'm supposed to take x and, remember, this means to multiply it by a negative 3. So everything you choose for x, you're going to multiply it times negative 3 and do the math to get the dependent guy. So let's say that I choose 0. 0, by the way, is my favorite thing to choose. So if I put 0 in here, then y is going to be negative 3 times 0. Well, that's 0. So my y is going to be 0. Okay? But that's only one point. Got to choose another one. Let's say I choose 1. Y is going to be negative 3 times what I chose, 1. So y would be negative 3. So now I have my 2 points and I'm ready to go. All right? So please remember, you've got to ask yourself what is being done to this letter. Whatever's being done to it, do the math to figure out the other letter. You can pick whatever you want over here, but don't pick huge numbers because they're kind of hard to graph. Don't pick fractions. Don't pick decimals. Pick things that are going to make your math easy, okay? All right, let's look at this example. Y is equal to negative x plus 4. Well, it's pretty easy for me to see that y, once again, is the number that I'm only going to get from doing some math. But here's my x. So I have to ask myself, what did the right side do to the x? Well, we all agree it added 4 to it, right? But what does a negative x mean, okay? This doesn't mean that x is negative. This means -1 times x, okay? We've talked about that since the very beginning of class, that there's an understood 1 there. So a negative x means to take -1 and multiply it times whatever you choose for x. It does not mean that the x is negative, okay? So this equation tells me to take -1 times my x and then add 4. So I've got to choose something for x, okay? Now, once again, I told you my favorite thing was 0, so I'm going to choose 0. Okay, so if I choose 0, then I'm going to put it in the problem. -1 times 0 would be 0, and then add 4 to that, and oh, that gives me 4 for my y. Okay, then I have to choose another point. I'm not going to be overly creative. I'm just going to pick one. So -1 times 1 would be -1, plus 4 would give me a 3. And now I have my 2 points and I'm ready to graph my line. But you have to remember that this negative in front of the x does not mean that x is negative. It means that you're taking -1 and multiplying it times x. Okay? So that's the first thing that kind of trips up a lot of people in this section. The next thing that trips up a lot of people is when they throw these fractions in there. We go, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do fractions. Well, you have learned some things as we've done this whole book, I hope, that will help you do some things. So let's come up with my table. Here's x, and I've got to figure out y. So what have I done to the x? Well, I've taken x and multiplied it times -1/3, and then I have subtracted 4. Everybody agree? Now, if you remember, for your first point, I told you what's my favorite thing to do? Well, my favorite thing to choose is also 0, because what happens when you put 0 in for x? It will make the fraction totally go away, because -1/3 times 0 is 0. So then you'll have 0 minus 4, which would give you -4 for your y. Okay, so if you pick 0 for x, it will always just make the fraction go away, and that problem will be easy to do. But, oh wait, Miss Willis, I have to have another point. So here's where you have to remember to be smart. We don't want to try to graph fractions. So we want to play smart. We've learned back in previous sections that if I have a 3 on the bottom, if I could put a 3 on the top, then that would make this equation, that would make the fraction parts cancel away. So for my second number, I'm going to choose 3. Why did I choose 3? Because it was the bottom. Okay? Now, what happens when you do that in math? You'll have y equals -1/3 times 3 minus 4. Well, what happens to this 3 and that 3? They will cancel, and all you'll have left is the top, -1. -1 minus 4 would be -5. So that makes it easy for me to find my second point. So whenever you are doing fractions, choose 0 for one of your points, and then choose the bottom for your second point. Okay? So let's take this example and work through that one more time. I have y equals 2/5 x plus 1, so I'm going to make my chart. I'm choosing for x because it's the one I did something to. Oh, it's a fraction, so I'm going to choose 0. When you put a 0 in there, it makes the fraction go away, and all you have left is the plus 1. But then I have to choose my second number, and I'm going to choose what's on the bottom. So I am choosing a 5. When you take 2/5 and multiply it times 5, the 5s will cancel out, and all you'll have left is what was on the top, 2 plus 1, and that gives you 3. And so now you have your second point that doesn't include any fractions. Okay? Good luck.